The information contained in this video is intended for educational purposes. We are not responsible for any damage to your device resulting from improper disassembly or installation. Proceed at your own risk.
All right, so it's time to install the new glass onto the Galaxy S6. Let's get to it. The best way that I found to remove the adhesive is just like this. So remember, you don't want to put a lot of pressure on the screen. I'm rubbing across the surface rather than pushing down really hard on it. So this adhesive kind of sticks to itself. So if you just use a rolling motion like this, the thicker parts of it tend to come off very easily. And then when you get to the areas where you have a thinner layer left, it's a little trickier. But again, I tried a couple different things and this seemed to work out the best. So this is the method that I used to use for Galaxy S3 and Galaxy S4s for the most part. And once again, it seems to be the best method here. Although I did feel like I wanted to try experimenting with a couple of alternatives just to see if I could find something that would make the process a little bit easier. First thing I did was to set the display down on a paper towel because this is going to get a little bit messy. And I'm going to block off the buttons at the bottom. We don't want any moisture getting down there. But I took some Goo Gone and just kind of put a thin coat right on the surface of the display. Now, I wasn't as patient as I should have been. I'd recommend you spread this out and let it sit for probably a good 5 or 10 minutes. As it works its way into the adhesive, it becomes a lot easier to remove it. Again, I didn't really take my time with this. I was more concerned with getting the project finished. But if you coat it, again, make sure none of the liquid goes down too far at the bottom of the screen. You don't want to get your buttons wet. You don't want to get too much of it up there at the upper end also because it can soak through the backside. But just a thin layer tends to make adhesive a lot easier to work with. From here, I just started gently scraping with the plastic razor blade. This way, it's very difficult to do any damage to the digitizer. But once again, let it sit on there for about 5 minutes or so, and then you'll notice it's a lot easier to work with. And you might prefer this method, but again, I'm convinced that next time I do this, I'll be using the first method that I used, which was rolling the adhesive off by hand. And you see that kind of the most stubborn part of this is when you have very thin pieces of adhesive stuck on here. When it's thick, it's a lot easier to get off. The thin stuff tends to stick and it's just hard to get underneath it for some reason. So I just kind of soaked a little more on top there. Little by little, it does come off. Okay, once we've got all the adhesive off, you're going to have a bunch of gunk on the screen. So some 99% alcohol works really well. Gets things spotless clean, and it also evaporates quickly so you don't leave any moisture behind. Don't end up with any smear marks or residue for the most part. So just go over this very last step of prep before you put your glass on, and you should come out with a really clean installation. Right, so we've got pretty much everything off the surface. You'll see a few smear marks. I wouldn't worry about that too much. My main concern though is up here in the corner where I know it's a little hard to see because the camera doesn't want to focus, but I got underneath the edge of the digitizer just a little bit there with the wire because I didn't do what I showed you earlier in the previous video, and that was to kind of pry underneath the glass and between the glass and the digitizer with the playing card. So what I'm going to do is add a small amount of adhesive glue up here in the corner and hopefully get this thing to sit down enough so that it's not very noticeable once we put it all together. So just a drop underneath here. You notice I have my gloves on because I don't want to get fingerprints all over the place once I clean this thing up. And just oil from your skin can get on surfaces and kind of be a headache to deal with. Not so much with AMOLEDs as with Retina displays. But we've got some glue underneath there. I'm going to cure this with the flashlight real quick. And then hopefully it comes out looking good at the end. Doesn't look much different right now, but I think when we get the glass on, you'll be surprised at how good of a patch job that is. Right, so we'll take our microfiber cloth and do one last wipe down before we put the glue on the screen. Want to make sure we get as much of that haze off as we possibly can. And you can probably spend an entire day cleaning this and still not be satisfied. So at a certain point, fortunately, the Loka will kind of prevent you from seeing any of the blemishes on here, but you do want to make sure you don't have any dust or any fingerprints, because those will show up, and once you put the glass on, they are there for the life of that glass, the glass that you put on. All right, so we're going to use the earpiece mesh at the top and the home button to align the screen, so that kind of makes things easy. Make sure that you have both of those installed. So fortunately, you won't need to buy a special mold for this because there's only one way the screen can go on, and that's going to be straight. We'll make our little stick man here with the glue. This is the best method that I've found to apply it evenly without creating any air bubbles. If you have another method, that's great, but the main thing is once the glue hits the edge of the display, you want to cure it so it doesn't run down into the buttons on the bottom or go through the holes at the top. If that happens, you're going to have problems with your proximity sensor, your front-facing camera, and potentially your speakerphone mic and a whole bunch of other stuff. So the answer is do not let the glue go past the edge of the display. But if it does, and hopefully it won't, you can always cure it underneath the UV lamp. It does take a little bit longer to cure the backside, but you don't want to put the board and the camera back inside until you're sure that there's no glue leaking through the midframe. Now that part takes a lot of practice, so if you haven't done this before, I'd play it on the safe side and cure this thing overnight, upside down, after you've cleared the front, because you don't want that glue getting into any of your components. But once you do it a couple times, it's really easy to just kind of seal the edges with the flashlight and prevent that glue from leaking. All right, so we've kind of flash cured that around the edges and put it under the UV lamp for a good 10 minutes. And now it is time to put it all back together and see what it looks like. I did have to add a little bit of adhesive to this cable at the top because after removing it a couple times, it does not want to stick anymore. So just cut a little bit of 3M 300 LSE. Get a lot of people asking about which adhesives I use. That's one of them. The red tape adhesive is also really good. It's a little bit thicker, but a little stronger as well. So depending on the application, usually 300 LSE from 3M is what I use if I'm going to cut it to size, and if I'm working on something like a tablet or a phone screen where I want a long strip of any particular width, I use the red tape. It comes anywhere from 1 millimeter up to 12 millimeters, I think it is. And they're already, it's really easy to just take it off the roll and stick it on your surface, go from there. So stick this thing down and get everything plugged in. Battery will be the last thing we connect. And let's see what it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and put a couple screws in. There's a real problem there. If you don't have it fully assembled, you won't be getting contact with that interface where the power button connects. So we'll just put a couple screws in here to hold everything together. And now we have a power button. Now if you look at the very upper right hand corner, you'll see a small blemish from where I pulled up the digitizer, but the entire screen does work, which is the good news. And you have to look pretty close at it to even notice, so I'm not too disappointed. Not a perfect installation. Next time we'll know better. Make sure that you pry up those corners first so you don't get your wire cut underneath. But again, it's not really bad. You only notice it if you're looking for it and you've got a completely white background. So overall, I'm not too disappointed, but I think it can come out a lot better if we just make sure to pry up those corners next time. If you found the video helpful, hit the like button and feel free to share it on the social network platform of your choice. Check out some of my recent repair and product review videos, and visit us on the web at gocellphonerepair.com. Thanks for watching.